Hello everyone and welcome back to another round of Tuesday Night Legacy. We've got another Legacy match for you. It's 8-Cast versus Delver. On the left we have Maxwell playing 8-Cast. This is a newer deck to the format, but it is a well-respected deck at this point due to its speed of being able to get out giant creatures like Kappa Cannoneer or the Urza Saga Construct and being able to kill your opponent quite quickly with unanswerable creatures. This deck is based around dropping a ton of zero-drop artifacts and getting advantage off of those by playing things like Thoughtcast or Thought Monitor, or just getting a bunch of 1/1s in the air. And of course, the top end of the deck is the Kappa Cannoneer that effectively has hexproof with Ward 4 and also gains unblockable whenever you play an artifact, which is quite easy in this deck. It does also run a playset of Force of Will since it is a blue deck, and it does have a playset of Chalice of the Void, which attempts to lock the can-tripping 1-mana blue decks out of the game, although this particular card has gotten worse with the printing of Prismatic Ending. On the other side of the board, we have the bully deck of the format, Blue-Red Delver. It's one of the best decks in the format because it is one of the most consistent decks in the format. Of course, running the Delver of Secrets, the secret best card of the deck, maybe not so secret, is the Dragon's Rage Channeler that allows the deck to basically see an extra card every time that they go for a cantrip, being able to surveil, filling their graveyard, either turning on the Delirium for the Dragon's Rage Channeler itself, turning it into another Delver of Secrets for flying beats, or to power out the Murktide Regent, the unanswerable almost in this format, except for Swords of Plowshares and maybe a Blast or two, and you get a 2-mana 8/8 if you're playing it to its max advantage. The rest of the cards in the deck are either counterspells or digging for one of these two creatures. It also runs a playset of Lightning Bolt in case you need to close out the game with some direct damage. If there was to be a weakness for Blue-Red Delver, it typically only can deal with 1 to 2 spells a turn to be able to either counter or deal with. So if Maxwell can go super wide really fast, then he does have a chance here. So let's go ahead and get into it. So we see Andrew on the play here, dropping that DRC to start the game. Starting with an Ancient Tomb into Chalice of the Void. Andrew says, no thank you to that. I'm going to spend my Force of Will, exiling a Ponder here, get a Surveil trigger, sending another card to the graveyard. It looked like it was just a fetch land. So Maxwell taking 2 damage there and does not get any payoff. Seeing 1 damage across, the Ledger Shredder, being a newer card to the Delver deck. Trying to go for, is that the Psi Master Thopterist I see over there? It is indeed. So Maxwell hoping to drop a bunch of zero casts. If he can do that, then he can start to get Thopters into play here. We see an Expressive Iteration binning a Delver of Secrets off of the Surveil trigger. Getting a Wasteland into play off of the Exile trigger, sending a card to Andrew's hand and 1 to the bottom. Looks like he has a Force of Will and a Murktide Regent in his hand. Quite good. Andrew kind of stuck here deciding if he wants to take Maxwell off of more mana or blue mana. Because I think he's realizing that if he hits the blue mana, it's not as big a deal as it is to get that extra mana. And Maxwell is definitely killing himself here by abusing this Ancient Tomb. So the Urza Saga comes down. Andrew decides that's a much better target. Blows up the Urza Saga before it can deal with anything else. That Chalice of the Void should be in the graveyard. It's just kind of hanging out there. It is not in play. And so we see an Emery, Lurker of the Loch, try to come into play. Andrew having the Force of Will for it. And we see more beats coming across here. I believe the Delve, yeah. So Darcy was online, dealing a bunch of damage, and Maxwell could not come back from that since one of his only lands was dealing 2 damage to him a turn, and he went ahead and scooped the game. So here we are on game 2. Maxwell throwing down a bunch of stuff, Urza Saga being his land for the turn, 2 Lotus Petals that can be sacrificed for any color mana, and the Mox Opal that is now Metalcraft online since he has 3 artifacts and can tap for any 1 color mana. A very good Moxen. One of the only legal ones still around. At least legal in Legacy. Pretty much any modern player will tell you that Mox Opal was hit unfairly. But, you know, maybe you can come and play Legacy if you don't like it. Then you get your Mox Opal back. We see a Mishra's Bauble from the Blue-Red Delver side, getting to look at the top card, seeing that it was a Thoughtcast. So this has the reduced mana cost of -3 since he had 3 artifacts in play, spending 2 mana to draw 2 cards. And we see an Emry being played off of the Otawara coming into play. Emry milling the top 4 cards. If it survives until the next turn, he can choose an artifact in his graveyard and be able to cast it. This combos really well with these 0-cast artifacts, especially Lotus Petal, being able to basically get an extra mana for the turn. Seeing a Brainstorm into a Scalding Tarn, getting rid of 2 cards Andrew did not want in his hand. Shuffling them away, getting that Volcanic Island. Most important card for the Blue-Red Delver deck. You know, if you can Surgical Extraction the Volcanic Islands, that's pretty good too. See a Pyroblast coming down, blowing up Emry, being able to target a blue permanent. Before Maxwell loses his Urza Saga, he does activate the Construct ability. The Constructs being extremely strong in this deck with how many artifacts 8-cast is dropping down. We see a Shadow Spear being the 1-drop that Maxwell decides to get off of his Urza Saga trigger. Being able to load a Shadow Spear onto a Construct. He already has 5 artifacts in play. Putting the Shadow Spear on it makes it a 6/6 with Trample and Lifelink. Pretty good. That Ponder looks like it's looking at 3 lands. But that actually might be good, as it looks like Andrew has no lands in his hand. So it looks like he's actually going to keep it. Decides to play a fetch, so he can get rid of those lands if he wants to. Force of Negation, Brazen Borrower, Force of Will. Andrew's got a pretty stacked hand here. So it looks like the play is probably going to be the Brazen Borrower, petty thefting the Construct, as bouncing a token back to hand doesn't actually happen. The token just ceases to exist, and you lose the advantage there. So petty theft on the Construct. It is now on an adventure, the Brazen Borrower. So all of that potential damage is gone now. Maxwell left pretty neutered. And since that happened at instant speed, Andrew basically back in control of this game. See an Expressive Iteration, one of the strongest cards in the deck. 2 mana to see 3 cards. Exiling Delver of Secrets, getting that into play. So much counter magic in Andrew's hand. I think he has a Ponder, a Force of Negation, and 2 Force of Wills. See another Chalice of the Void on 1, try and come down. A Force of Negation is going to say no thank you to that. Maxwell spending the rest of his resources, exiling his own Brazen Borrower for a Force of Will. And Andrew deciding if it's important enough. Yes, decides he does want to win that race there. So Force of Will to the Force of Will. Chalice is gone. Chalice is exiled. Force of Negation says that it's gone for good. So both players at 0 cards in hand, but a Delver in play with a Brazen Borrower on an adventure and Expressive Iteration off the top. Andrew definitely in a good spot here. And that is a Magic card, Maddening Hex. Oops. Sorry about that. Maddening Hex, an excellent answer to basically any deck that is trying to play non-creature spells. Having to roll a d6 every time they cast a non-creature spell and take that much damage that's rolled every time. And because they're the only opponent, that last line of text just doesn't matter in Legacy. This is another example of a card designed for Commander and just no consideration for what it's going to have, what impact it's going to have in other Eternal formats. This card completely shuts down Storm decks, but it also does a lot of damage to a deck like this that's trying to cast all of these zero-cast non-creature spells. Although Maxwell did draw pretty much the best card he could have in this situation, the Kappa Cannoneer. And with the Shadow Spear on it, he might be able to stabilize. Although Andrew does have 6 damage in play here. So it is going to be close. We see 6 damage crash through down to 5. Another expressive iteration. Looking at an End the Festivities and a Brainstorm and a land. I think the last card in Andrew's hand is a Lightning Bolt, so he is 1 damage off of lethal. Checking his graveyard for some reason. Decides to keep the Brainstorm, land to play. End the Festivities to the bottom. Casting the Brainstorm, still looking for that Lightning Bolt. Doesn't find it, but he does find a Dragon's Rage Channeler. So this is going to represent 9 damage the next turn. So even with Kappa gaining, it's a 4/4, it's a 5/5, 6/6, even gaining 6 life, going back up to 11, Andrew does have lethal next turn. And it's just an Urza Saga. It's not going to be enough here. So he comes through. Andrew doesn't even want to block, because he goes up to 11. Andrew basically sitting on the win here, and there's the Lightning Bolt, and that is going to be game. So there you have it. We see Blue-Red Delver doing its thing, staying on top of the tempo, and being able to overtake the 8-cast deck once it ran out of resources. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you want to see more of this content in the future. We have a bunch more of these on the channel, so go check out our backlog to see some other premium content. If you're curious about a deck you saw played here, the deck lists are always in the description of the video below. Thanks as always to Spellhold Games for letting us play at their store, and we'll see you next time for some more Magic content on Tuesday Night Legacy. Bye!